Hello, everyone. We're just doing an impromptu recording here, very happily so. We're blessed to be joined by Marcel and Stan at Franka's kind invitation. Of course, you're always welcome here in this room. Love to add you to the email list. And with that, I'm going to pass the microphone to Marcel because we want to hear what Marcel has to say about planting trees versus perhaps other forms of geoengineering. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just being the radio announcer here, trying to drum up some interest. But with that, I'm going to pass it to our guest, Marcel. Have at it. We're all ears.
Thank you. A few minutes ago, we were in an after chat on Humanity Rising, and Franka was telling about the initiative of cooling our climates to clouds. So the common denominator is that clouds are a very important part of the energy balance system, and that clouds, the proper clouds, are really cooling our planet. And if you can increase the number of clouds, then you will cool down our planet. So there are several ways that you can produce clouds or strengthen the clouds. One is that you let nature go its way. And when you have nature producing, and then let me define nature. When I'm talking about nature, then it's about highly biodiverse nature. So forests that are producing the right organic aerosols where water vapor connects to and forming the clouds. That's one way to produce clouds. So the clouds that are being produced by forests will cool Earth. Then there are, I think that the group that you're around is the cloud vessels. So that when you're producing the clouds on the oceans, you produce also the salt crystals and you're forming clouds. And Peter Paul is one of the co-founders of Green Water Cools, so he's more the expert. But so that's the second part. So you're producing the clouds. Then there's a third group, what I call more the it's geoengineering with the present clouds. So there is a professor, for example, in the Netherlands, on the Technical University in Delft, and he wants, as a last resort, he wants to strengthen the power reflection of existing clouds by putting more particles into the clouds, and then strengthen the reflection power. So let's say that those are the three options that we have. So we have clouds from forests, clouds from the vessels, and clouds that are being strengthened by bringing in more particles into the clouds. So let me first say that the clouds that are produced by the vessels, I don't think that will be harmful for the rain patterns, but I'm not quite certain, but I think that there will be no harm done about the rain cycle. Perhaps it will increase the rain cycle, whatever. So I'm open for that part of it. What I'm fully against is that we put particles in existing clouds, because somebody said that will be the fastest ticket to the existing of mankind. It will be suicide on a large scale, because when you strengthen those clouds, they will not produce rain, and they will disconnect the present rain cycles, and then it will be more harmful. Yeah, perhaps you will do a little bit of sun reflection, but then you're destroying the rain cycles, and then it will be the end of mankind. When you, at least what we know from Green Water Cools, is that when you have healthy forests like the Amazon or the temperate forest in the Northern Hemisphere, and you produce the right organic aerosols, and the right organic aerosols, when they can connect with water vapor, then you form very tiny raindrops. And those tiny raindrops are having two advantages. One, when water vapor goes back to water, from a physical point of view, an electron goes to a lower energy state and a photon leaves the water molecule. And that infrared radiation lies within the atmospheric window. And that's a special frequency, because when Earth emits infrared radiation as a black body, it does that between 0 and 100 micrometers. And the greenhouse gases are picking up the radiation and absorb it and re-emit it, and that's part of the greenhouse gas. But between 8 and 40 micrometers, all the greenhouse gases are insensitive for that radiation. So that's water vapor, it's the biggest greenhouse gas that we have, is insensitive. It's transparent. Carbon dioxide is transparent. Methane is transparent. So when we have that infrared radiation going to space, it will immediately leave Earth without any interference. When you have the right organic aerosols, you form very tiny droplets, and those droplets don't absorb the infrared radiation that's being released from that water vapor molecule. So then when the part of the radiation is going to space, it will still leave space. But if you have the wrong organic particles, then you form thick raindrops. And those thick raindrops are absorbing the infrared radiation that's being released by the water molecule. So you still harvest the infrared radiation. And also that raindrops most likely are absorbing incoming sunlight and also absorbing energy. So those are the wrong raindrops, and those raindrops are being produced by inorganic aerosols. So those are the wrong particles. So healthy forests produce very strong reflecting clouds, and those clouds cool in two ways. It releases beta radiation, that's the infrared radiation that's been coming out of the water molecule when water vapor goes to water, and clouds are being, and the sunlight is being reflected. So those clouds are cool, are cool clouds. We know that from the research. A lot of scientific papers are being written on that. The other part of geoengineering with the wrong particles will perhaps reflect a little bit of sunlight, but it will destroy the water cycle, because those clouds are not producing the right amount of rain at the right time. And then in the middle, and perhaps you can tell me a little bit more about that, because we haven't looked at that very closely. Then you've got the clouds that are being produced by the vessels on the oceans. Yeah, they are producing, if I'm correct, inorganic salt crystals, yeah, and water droplets, those forming the clouds. As far as we know, those clouds are less strong in reflecting sunlight than the clouds that are being produced by forest. But as far as I know, at this moment, they are not tempering or hampering the rain cycle. So from that point of view, I don't see any harm being done. What we are focusing on is from a minimizing regret point of view. So if you want to minimize regret for society, then you need to bring in the cooling power. And then when you bring in the cooling power from, let's say, a nature point of view, and I also do that from the vessel point of view, looking from nature, then you can make two decisions. You're going to restore nature in the proper way, or you don't restore nature. If you don't restore nature, if you restore nature and the cooling power of clouds is really there, then you will have a huge benefit for society, and you can cool down or stabilize the climate within 30 years. You can stabilize and you can bring temperature back. If you do so, then the potential for society will be huge. Then if clouds don't cool, then you don't have any regrets whatsoever, because you're taking up the carbon dioxide, yeah, that you want to harvest for Earth 2050. If you don't restore nature, yeah, then the only possible best outcome is that you have no regret when clouds don't cool. But you will have a huge regret when clouds are cooling. because then you will pass your tipping points. So from that point of view, for minimizing regret for climate, you will always restore nature. Then let's take the cloud vessels. So you can take the action. You're going to bring a lot of vessels onto the ocean, produce those clouds that will be cooling, or you don't do it. So then the trade-off will be, okay, you're producing the clouds. When the cooling capacity is there, you've got huge benefits. So that makes sense. If clouds don't cool, well, there's not really any harm done, most likely because you don't have interference with the rain cycle. So from that point of view, for minimizing regrets, you can do it. If you don't do it and clouds cool, yeah, then you will have a regret while not doing so. And if the research is not cooling, yeah, then okay, then you throw away some money. Okay, but from a climate insurance perspective, that can be worthwhile doing. So from a minimizing regrets point of view, you will produce clouds and you will take those kinds of action. So what we are doing, we are trying to get the reinsurance companies on board, validating the cooling role of nature. And then when you have the real value of the cooling power of nature by forming the clouds, then you see the real value of clouds, and then you will proceed by producing more clouds. So that's what we're doing at this moment. My background is I've got an economical background, and by coincidence, I started working within the pension industry, running portfolios. And since 1993, I've got I'm involved in responsible investing, sustainable investing, impact investing, whatsoever. And I know what institutional investors, long-term investors can have an impact on society, and what are and reinsurance companies are most of the time the front runners, because they are looking at the risk point of view. And both the reinsurance companies and institutional investors, they don't like system risk. So when you can explain that you can lower the system risk, then you will get natural bystanders for implementing this kind of policy. And at the moment, we are from restoring nature. We are working together with African countries, Amazonia countries, because they are having a lot of cooling power, potential cooling power when we restore over their nature. And from restoring nature, you can get, for let's say, for a European perspective, we can have a triple win, because when we use development money to restore nature in Africa, and we restore the West African rainforest and connect it to the Indian Ocean, to the east side of where Ethiopia is, you will bring back the water cycle, produce more food, increase the livelihoods. You will lower the tension in the Nile Basin because you restore the water tables over there. Then Egypt will not going to bomb the Renaissance Dam in the Nile Basin, the Blue Nile Basin of Ethiopia. When that's being done, the tensions will be lower. When the livelihood increases, there will be less climate migration to Europe. So less tension in Europe also. So the right-wing parties are also happy. And then you have development money, you've got less climate migration, and on top of that, you will lower the climate risk because you restore the cooling power of nature. So that's a triple win. And for those who are in Florida, they will also be benefiting it, because when you restore the West African rainforest, you will get less powerful hurricanes, because the fuel of a hurricane is coming from the African Sahara Desert. That's fuel the hurricanes at the west side of Africa. There, the hurricanes start, then they cross over the Atlantic Ocean towards Florida. So by restoring the West African rainforest and greening the desert, you will also lower the assets at risk in, for example, Florida. So that's in a nutshell what we're doing with Green Water Cools. And I would love to hear more what you're doing about producing the cooling clouds through the vessels, because we have seen it and I love the concept, but I don't know enough about it. So I'm eager to learn about it. So who wants to pick up the mic, or how does it? Nev, you unmute yourself, Jim.
Yeah, thank you. So first, welcome to everyone in this meeting. Let me just make a few comments about the logistics of this meeting, and then we can get back to the topic that you've introduced to us, Marcel, which is very, very close to our hearts. And so as regards logistics of this meeting, this is normally our multi-hour Tuesday weekly work meeting, as different from our Friday, Saturday, 24-hour collective intelligence block party, to which you are all also welcome. Those are kind of our two biggest meetings of the week here in this channel. There are other meetings that happen, and in general, this channel is kind of like an almost 24/7 channel, so feel free to pop in anytime and hang with whoever is here and be part of the conversation. So in terms of our weekly meetings, since some people joined after we got started, Marcel, I'm just commenting that we're taking this opportunity, since Franka invited Marcel and Stan to join us for this conversation, growing out of a great conversation at Humanity Rising. Peter Paul, I assume you're joining from the same vector. Absolutely welcome. Robert Hayes, I'm not sure if you're joining from the same vector or from a different one. In any case, you're absolutely welcome here.
Yes, David, me too.
Oh, great. Welcome, Robert, and welcome everyone. And feel free to say hello when the opportunity presents itself. We often do this. We often just use the raised hand if somebody wants to talk, and that just means that you're in the queue to talk. So if everyone's cool with that, we'll go with the flow for a bit, maybe another, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes. I mean, this is just such a golden opportunity, because this is exactly the meeting that needs to happen right now at the level of planet Earth, where all of us players, people like us who see what's going on and get the urgency, people like Bill, who are out there fighting the good fight every day, all of us here. James is in Cork, Ireland, who will introduce himself whenever he's ready, is organizing a really awesome meeting on solar radiation management with a lot of names that all of you would recognize immediately, like Peter Wadhams, like Guy McPherson, Ye Tao, Paul Beckwith, etc. So we are a small group of usual suspects. And what's unusual about this meeting is that a bunch of us are meeting each other for the first time. All of the usual suspects need to be rounded up. Okay, it's Casablanca all over again. I use that quote that everyone's familiar with, since Casablanca is widely regarded as one of the top 3 movies of all time. Melissa, my partner, who's here in the other room in a different Zoom meeting on a different computer, her name is Melissa Koch. And if the last name rings a bell, Howard Koch, her grandfather, wrote Casablanca. So I know what I'm talking about when I say round up the usual suspects. Okay. This is a partial roundup, and God bless Stan, God bless Franka, God bless all of you for being here. And let's participate in more roundups until all the usual suspects are rounded up, and we can have an actual holistic conversation about this, which we're doing right now, and we need to do a lot more of. Okay, so it sounds like everyone's cool with that. Does anyone have any questions or comments about logistics of this meeting before I proceed further? Is everyone cool going with the flow? And I know we have other important business to discuss, but this is usually a multi-hour meeting, and so there's time for everything. Bill, yes, go ahead.
If anybody joined after you agreed for everybody to be okay with recording, you need to ask that again.
That's right. We are recording. People usually are alerted to that when they enter the room. So we are recording, and we can pause anytime. Just do this if you want to pause, or say, hey, Jamin, please pause recording. It's never a problem. We can pause as many times as we need to. Thank you, Bill. We are recording because this is an important historic conversation. Okay, so having dispensed with logistics conversation, now let's get into the technical. Let me just give sort of kind of a brief, kind of bulleted overview of where we, the community here, are for the most part coming from, and the first thing I want to say is we don't all have to agree with everything. And so when I say this is where we're coming from, it's just sort of kind of a center of mass, shall we say, of a diverse spectrum of viewpoints. So the center of mass roughly goes like the following, okay? The planet is overheating at a rate of approximately 25 boops per year. What is a boop? B-O-O-P. A boop is, and this comes out of research by BP, hence the name boop, which was coined by Professor Stephen Salter, University of Edinburgh. He just gave a cutesy little name to a very large quantity, which is the total amount of energy consumed by humanity in 1 year in all forms: oil and gas, coal, solar, wind, the burning of firewood, horses pulling carriages. The total amount of all energy consumed in 1 year is 1 boop. So it's a lot of energy. It's 10 to some large number of joules, okay? The planet is currently overheating by approximately 25 boops per year. If we were overheating by 1 boop per year, it would be a really big deal. The fact that the planet is overheating by 25 boops per year makes it 25 times a really big deal. It's a really, 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 really big deal. Okay. Why is that happening? It's more complex than what I'm about to say, but you all know the story. There's so many greenhouse gases in the atmosphere that it's retaining heat. We all know the difference between visual spectrum and infrared. The visual gets absorbed. It tries to sweat it out by emitting infrared. The infrared gets blocked by the greenhouse gases, and you all know how the story goes. Well, the numerics of the story are that we're net retaining 25 boops of heat per year. Most of that is going to overheating the oceans, secondarily melting ice, but it's doing damage no matter where it strikes, and the planet's overheating. And the melting of the Arctic sea ice is the next innocent victim on death row about to get its head chopped off. Oh, it looks like Marco just came alive here. Hey, Marco. Yeah, we've got some new faces, and I was just covering logistics a little bit ago. Basically, we're going with the flow. Franka invited some awesome folks to this meeting in an impromptu way. So we're taking a break from our normal weekly business, but just for like an hour or so, maybe even a little longer, because this is so darn important. So notably Marcel, Peter Paul, Robert, Stanley, all at Franka's kind invitation. And I'm so glad you're all here. So back to the overall summary. The latest innocent victim on death row about to get its head chopped off is the Arctic sea ice, 80% of which is gone, right? 80% of those innocent victims have already been slaughtered. 20% are left, and they're slated for execution in the next few months, in the sense that, if you'll pardon my dramatic prose, the overheating of the planet, which is being concentrated around the Arctic, is causing the remaining Arctic sea ice to be melted at a ferocious, horrific rate, to the point that it might be all gone as soon as September this year, and at the very latest, summer next year. And I don't think I need to tell anyone in this room how great a tragedy that would be. My point is simply that it's coming fast and furious. So we have tremendous urgency to do 2 things. Number one, we need to engage upon a major and massive boop reduction program for Mother Earth. Okay, that's right. You heard me right. We need a massive boop reduction program for Mother. And that will come only, there's only one way to do that in any kind of a reasonable time frame, on time frame of months, which is how much time we have if we want to save any of the Arctic sea ice and then actually rebuild it. We need to implement this boop reduction program within a matter of months. And there is one class of solutions, and only one class of solutions, that can do it, and that is solar radiation management. Now, Marcel, what you're proposing falls within that. you're saying, hey, let's reforest so that these trees can produce more vapor, more droplets, more clouds that can reflect sunlight back into space. There's a number of ways of doing it. We are huge proponents here of marine cloud brightening, which the thought leader for which is currently Professor Stephen Salter, University of Edinburgh. And in decades past, thought leaders have included Sean Toomey and Professor Latham of England. There's a lot of folks supporting it, but nowhere near enough, which is why I keep emphasizing we need to keep rounding up the usual suspects and even some unusual suspects and get us all together to have the conversation. Other methods of solar radiation management that have been proposed include ICE 911, led by Dr. Leslie Field at Stanford. She's invited to a big meeting that James is putting together. Yet other forms of SRM include mirror reflection, which some of us are involved in, most notably Bill and myself and others in this room have all contributed to. But the bottom line is the big solution is solar radiation management. There have been some really good ideas proposed for how to do that and some really bad ideas proposed for how to do that. Among the worst are stratospheric aerosol injection, injecting sulfuric acid into the stratosphere and turning it loose in a very non-reversible way. One of the beauties of marine cloud brightening is it's not only reversible, but it's fine-tunable, it's optimizable. You can optimize it, you can model it. And on meetings I've had with Professor Stephen Salter and Dr. The guy at the University of Leeds, somebody help me out, this expert computer modeler there, Alan Gadian, University of Leeds, an expert modeler. We've looked at how we can optimize for the placement of the vessels for doing marine cloud brightening in different places throughout the oceans so that we optimize for exactly things like the Indian Ocean dipole and its impacts between East Africa and Australia, and how we can actually optimize the placement of those vessels and cloud production so that we increase precipitation in Australia, thus preventing more wildfires there, forest fires, and also reducing precipitation, reducing excess precipitation in places like Kenya, which have been suffering from flooding because the dipole is screwed up. So not only can we cool the planet as a whole, but we can do localized regional things like the Indian Ocean dipole, like cooling down the Caribbean and reducing hurricanes in the Caribbean region of the world, including the southeastern coast of my country, the United States. We can also do intensive focused work up in the Arctic region, cooling the Arctic by creating more clouds up there, as well as applying other SRM techniques up there, such as ICE 911, increasing the reflectivity of the existing ice, which is becoming increasingly dark as ice melts, uncovering essentially the accumulated soot and other forms of carbon in Arctic ice as well as Greenland. So the bottom line is that SRM is the only answer, the only way that we can cool our planet in time to save the Arctic and prevent even more devastating effects such as wildfires from proceeding. And you had also mentioned, interestingly, Marcel, some interesting effects in terms of infrared, because most of SRM operates on visible spectrum sunlight coming from the sun, but we also have to model and optimize the whole thing holistically, including infrared being re-emitted from the absorbed energy on the surface of the Earth and what can impede that. So all of this beckons for holistic modeling and optimization. We need to find the right mix of SRM solutions, as it won't just be one solution, but there's a whole bunch of solutions that can work together. But it is one planet, and so we need a holistic approach, including modeling of all the different ways of doing SRM, so that we can find the very best mix. And anyway, my comments are just to kind of help level us out in terms of where we're coming from, since we've heard a bit from where you're coming from, Marcel. And with that, I'm going to invite others to share where they're coming from. I'm going to pass the talking feather feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to talk. I'll go ahead and MC here, and love to hear from everyone. Passing the talking feather. Thank you.
I've got one question. Can you mentioned the unit boop. So how many boops are there in a year?
We are overheating at a rate of approximately 25 boops per year, based on NASA's estimates of 0.8 watts per square meter net heating on average over the entire surface of the Earth. And if you convert that to boops, it's basically multiply 0.8 watts per square meter times.
If we take the entire energy consumption of mankind for a full year, yeah, so all the energy that we're using, all the fossil fuels that we're using in a full year as mankind, so how many boops are that?
That is the definition of one boop. So okay. To be clear, the total amount of energy mankind uses in 1 year, the burning of all fossil fuels, all the conversion of wind and solar to electricity, the burning of dung, the burning of firewood, geothermal, all the energy we use in 1 year, add it all up for a whole year. That's the definition of one boop. Now that we have that quantity and we can measure it and we can express it in joules, et cetera, we can then compare that to the amount of overheating that is happening to the planet, which is fairly straightforward to measure. You measure the amount of ice that's melting per year, you multiply it by the specific energy of ice in terms of joules per gram, et cetera, and add that to the net overheating of the ocean. Those are the two main sinks or absorbers of heat, not the only ones, but the two biggest. Bottom line, yeah.
And the other question is, if you take the full incoming solar energy of 1 year that's coming into Earth, yeah, what percentage is one boop of, if you have 100% solar energy for a full year that's hitting Earth?
Yeah.
How much percentage is one boop?
So let me put it in the following terms. There's approximately 9,000 boops of incoming solar energy bombarded on the planet every year. A little less than 30% of those immediately get reflected away. So net, a little over 70% of those 9,000 incoming boops get absorbed, right? And the vast majority of that gets re-radiated away. And so it's kind of like a river by analogy, that a huge volume of water is going through this river. But if we dam up one end of the river and reduce the amount that can flow over that dam, even by a little bit, that difference then accumulates and accumulates and accumulates, and we get, a Yangtze River or Yellow River effect or whatever in China, where anyway, but I'm going off onto a tangent. The bottom line is that even a small difference in the balance of incoming versus outgoing means accumulation or reduction in the case of an ice age. But in either case, even a small amount, and 25 boops is not a small amount, it's a large amount. So we have been massively accumulating heat, which of course is melting the ice and overheating the oceans and driving the wildfires and the droughts and everything else. So the net is the heat imbalance is approximately 25 boops per year right now. Back to you, Marcel, and then I see James has his hand up. Go ahead, Marcel.
One boop is all the energy that we're using as mankind. So that's roughly 1 hour of sunlight that hits the Earth's surface. Yeah? So 1 hour of sunlight equals to one boop. And to give you an idea of how much energy is being transformed by the Brazilian rainforest alone. So I'm living in the Netherlands. I don't know where you're living, but Brazilian rainforest evapotranspires in 1 hour the same amount of energy that we in the Netherlands use in a full year. So the Brazilian rainforest evapotranspire per second, the equivalent of 15 nuclear atomic bombs per second. When you're looking at the energy balance of Earth, so you want to come up with 25 boops of additional energy compared to the 9,000, there are several options. So if you have the energy balance of Earth, it's the warming minus the cooling processes, that's the energy balance of Earth. So to make it very easy, if the starting point is 0, so 1 minus 1 is 0, that's the balance, yeah? Then you can come up with +1 by adding more warming elements, so 2 minus 1 is 1, or you can come up with 1 by 1 minus 0 is 1. The clouds are the cooling role, yeah? So when you have less clouds into the system, there's less cooling, yeah? That also is warming up. So what in the climate models they are doing is that the deforestation effect, yeah, which leads to less clouds, is lowering the cooling capacity, is warming up. So what they have done in the IPCC models, they have added up the diminishing cooling capacity of Earth through deforestation, roughly 13 times the size of France. They added it up to the warming part of carbon dioxide. The diminishing effect of cooling capacity and the warming aspects by more greenhouse gases are fully correlated with each other because the underlying variable is growing population growth. Because since we had more fossil fuels to our use, we were able to grow more production, welfare went up, there were more people we needed to feed, more people to feed, we needed more agricultural land, we started deforesting, but also we're having a wood economy, so we also needed more wood for the houses. So when we're doing that, we were cutting down the forest, losing cooling capacity, and because they have the same effect, you can make a perfect model with these two variables, with only this variable, because it's fully correlated with each other. But when you are going to predict the future, you've got a problem, because when you do this, you get an oversensitivity of carbon dioxide for future temperature rises. So when IPCC and the climate scientists are warning for a 4-degree temperature rise, yeah, they are saying that 4 degrees in that same sentence, you look at page 150 of the latest IPCC report, all the climate warning, doom scenarios, etc. We get a 4-degree temperature rise, comma, because we cannot model clouds. And they don't know if clouds are having a warming, a positive feedback loop or a negative feedback loop. Now, we know that clouds have a negative feedback loop, but what they are forgetting in the climate models is that the deforestation effect. So that's not in the model. And if you, in the Netherlands, we've got a climate journalist, and she takes CEOs with her to the North Pole. And she tells to the CEOs, look at the North Pole, that's the refrigerator of Earth. Well, she cannot be more wrong, because what she's saying, when she's going to the beach in the summer, she opens her refrigerator, she takes out cooling elements, she put it in the cooling box, she put her food and beer in the cooling box, she go to the beach. Then at the beach, she says to me, this is my refrigerator. I said, no, your refrigerator is at home, it's plugged in the power grid. The reason that we have ice on the North Pole is that we had forest, because the forests are plugged into in the solar grid. They are transforming all the incoming sunlight because they need a lot of energy for transforming water into water vapor. And what a lot of people don't know is that for producing biomass, the tree needs 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of water, photosynthesis, a little bit of sunlight, a little bit of magic, you get 1 biomass molecule. But for harvesting 1 molecule of carbon dioxide, a tree has to evapotranspire, like with human sweat, at least 100 molecules of water vapor. And that takes an enormous amount of energy. So when you take the trees and the biodiversity out of the climate equation, you lose the cooling capacity. So when you bring back the cooling capacity through forest, yeah, then you get a leverage into the system. It's for every carbon dioxide they harvest, they produce 100 molecules of water vapor. So so in one day they produce a lot of books. Yeah, and when you take the energy balance of Earth, the biggest leverage for temperature rise is decreasing the albedo effect. So increasing the albedo effect is the smartest way to lower the temperature on Earth. But what we are saying, let's restore nature from minimizing regret. And if the ones that also are helpful, the solar vessels on the oceans, if they don't disturb the rain cycle, then go ahead. But if you have producing clouds that are causing effects on the rain cycle, then you will be causing suicide for mankind, because then you will destroy the rain cycles, and that will destroy our food production, etc. And then the medicine is worse than, how do we say that? Operation succeeded, but the patient died. So it's very important that from that perspective that we indeed have a holistic view. And from that point of view, I would love to see more evidence about the cooling role of the solar vessels, because I think that can help. But you need to see also that the nature has that enormous leverage while producing the clouds, because they produce so much water vapor. And if you want to produce the same amount of water vapor by the vessels, you need a lot of vessels. But I would do both.
Yeah, good stuff, Marcel. James, you had your hand up, followed by Jamin, followed by Marco. Whenever you're ready, James.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, thanks for that, Stanley. Sorry, Stanley, you've moved over. Marcel, thank you for that. Yeah, you're very much right in what you're saying about, the albedo and restoring the albedo, and natural through nature and everything else is the way to go, and has been the way to go. Unfortunately, we left the time pass for that, because at the moment now, the last peer-reviewed literature that's coming out is showing that even the Amazon now is a carbon source rather than a carbon sink, because they can't keep up with the photosynthesis because of the increased heat. So the actual possibility of reforesting and everything as part of a solution, unfortunately, it is necessary, but unfortunately it's not the first domino we need to tackle now, because we've left it too late for that strategy, unless we do something, as you said, about the albedo. So yes, as James said, there is no one magic bullet, and we have to take everything into consideration. And the very idea of us having these meetings, and the meeting I'm arranging, is to trying to form some sort of consensus among those who are in favour of SRM, solar radiation management, whichever forms they may be, but to come to consensus that the essential thing is that we need to cool the planet anyway. That's first and foremost. And does none of those top scientists are in any doubt now that we've left it too late for any other mitigations or interventions that should have been done decades ago. We have no other choice now but to interject with the albedo. Look, we do it every day. Doctors do it every day with interventions with people with cancer, and treat them with radiation, which is more than likely going to kill the cells in their body, but it's prolonging their life or whatever. What we need now is to prolong unfortunately a bad situation. But what we need to do is buy ourselves time to put all these ideas, like you're talking about reforestation and everything else. There's many good ideas out there. The problem is that we don't have the right people discussing them. The people in power, we don't have them discussing it logically, at least for as far as I'm concerned, or the rest of us here. We don't seem to hear that anyway, or that they don't have actually, have any other solutions other than decarbonising, which is the wrong way to go. So, I would very much like you to catch up on more of Professor Salter's work. I have his PDFs of all his research at the moment, but I'll have to ask him if it's okay to pass on some to you. If you could pass me on your email in the chat, and I can try and get them to you as soon as I can. But I just would like to share, if Jim, and if you could make me a co-host there a second, I just want to share something there. Now it's only a couple of minutes out of a video that I'll share the link with anyway, and you can watch the whole lot of it in your own time.
You're good to go.
Cheers. And I'll comment on it afterwards.
Paper is going to be featured here. Lijing Cheng et al. This paper appears in Advances in Atmospheric Sciences, just published this month. Here is the, I will leave the URL link in the comments section, but here's the URL link to access the full paper. So what's the abstract here? The increased concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere from human activities traps heat within the climate system and increases ocean heat content, OHC. Here we provide the first analysis of recent OHC changes through 2021 from two international groups. The world ocean in 2021 was the hottest ever recorded by humans, and the 2021 annual ocean heat content value is even higher than last year's record value by 14 plus or minus 11 zetajoules. So in other words, 2020 was a record-setting year, and 2021 was even hotter than the record-setting year of 2020. And 1 zetajoule is 10 to the 21 joules. You might recall I went through all the prefixes in my original ocean heat content video that I did some 6-7 months ago. So they use the IAP and the CAS data set, and by 16 plus or minus 10 zetajoules using the NCEI NOAA data set. The long-term ocean warming is larger in the Atlantic and Southern Ocean than in other regions, and is mainly attributed via climate model simulations to an increase in anthropogenic greenhouse gas concentrations. The year-to-year variation of OHC is primarily tied to ENSO in the 7 maritime domains of the Indian, tropical Atlantic, North Atlantic, Northwest Pacific, North Pacific, Southern Oceans, and Mediterranean Sea. Robust warming is observed, but with distinct interannual to decadal variability. Basically referring to what AMO might be doing, the NAO, the IPO, the IOD, the PDO, so forth. 4 out of 7 domains showed record high heat content in 2021. The anomalous global and regional ocean warming established in this study should be incorporated into climate risk assessments, adaptation, and mitigation. Ooh, nice little poke at IPCC for kind of skimming over oceanic effects in their reports.
So you see there, like, we're all exponential heating is occurring at the moment now in record quantities in the last 2 years alone, and we're talking in zetajoules. And 1 boop, as Jamin was describing a while ago, well, 2 zetajoules equals to 1 boop. So and if you go in that video, if you listen to the whole lot of that video, we're acquiring our heating over by over 200 zetajoules in a year, which is basically 100 boops. And he's saying that out of the 100 boops that we're retaining, where 93% of it, what people don't understand, 93% of that heat has been stored in the ocean for long term. We don't notice the changes until now. We're starting to notice the changes, obviously, with the heat, the deoxygenation and desalination of the ocean. But that's what the majority of people don't understand, that although 93% of that, the imbalanced heat that we've been retaining for the last couple of, since the industrial age really, the the remaining 7% is what's responsible for the ice melting in the Arctic and the polar caps melting and the the atmospheric changes we're having and everything. It's only the 7% in the atmosphere that's responsible for that at the moment. The 93% has been heating up and lurking all along. And when the ocean heat content becomes in equilibrium with the atmospheric temperatures, then all of that mass 93% extra heat that's been building up all along is going to be in, it is going to, come into the atmosphere basically. And bear in mind that these record temperatures have been taken in the La Nina. We're not even in an El Nino yet, so we do not have no more time for mitigation things like reforestation and things, programs like that, unless we can buy ourselves some time. And Professor Salter's his work and the ships that he's creating, they don't actually produce clouds, they just produce brighter clouds by putting up salt particles in 800 nanometer sizes. So they have the science and the ethics worked out in the PDFs that I'll share with you, and I think you'll be much more optimistic about the work, and also in the sense that it is more or less the most invasive method that we can come up with for solar radiation management, because it's controllable as well. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, James. All right, we got 3 folks with their hands up: Jamin, followed by Marco, followed by Marcel. HEJ just entered the room. Welcome, HEJ. We are recording, and but feel free to say hello. And also, everyone, feel free to raise your hand if you want to comment. One comment I wanted to add to James's comments, and this addresses something Marcel was raising earlier, is the restoration of nature. The restoration of nature is absolutely vital. And there may be folks out there who think that we can do this with geoengineering alone. We are not those folks. In fact, the 2 biggest projects that we're working on in terms of physical projects, one is indeed solar radiation management, cooling the planet intensively with the application of solar radiation management. The other is transitioning the world to a plant-based diet so that we reduce and in fact eliminate and in fact reverse the onslaught, the Holocaust against nature, against animals, against pollinators, driven not only by animal agriculture, but the vast majority of the onslaught is animal agriculture, but also unsustainable agriculture generally. But making the shift to plant-based foods is absolutely essential. And so in a week, I'm heading off to Los Angeles, where here I'll show on my image here, you see where it says Community Cafe. That was the first iteration of an evolution towards feeding everyone in Los Angeles plant-based foods for free, making plant-based foods a basic human right for everyone in Los Angeles, helping to transform Los Angeles into the world's first compassionate metropolis. So we're doing a press conference there next week. We're introducing Molly Baszler, running for Los Angeles City Council, engaging with other local politicians. We're going to actually install a compassionate government in Los Angeles. We're doing regime change in Los Angeles, which as a metropolitan area involves multiple governments at city and county level, spanning multiple cities and counties. And so we're installing a compassionate government. I'm going down there as Darth Vader, as I was at COP26. Google Darth Vader COP26, where I perform and sing. And so Darth and I are going to be leading and announcing the regime change in Los Angeles, installing a compassionate government and feeding everyone. Are you cool with that, Darth? Yeah, good. Okay, so we're going to be, anyway, so that's just a quick update on that. We're not just about geoengineering. In fact, our 3 biggest things that we work on here are SRM, plant-based foods for everyone, and as the beginning of making all basic human needs basic human rights. And the third area is literally a transformation in democracy and collective intelligence. Part of installing a compassionate government is a government driven by the collective intelligence, not just of all Los Angelinos, but actually of all humanity. So we're bringing all of humanity together in a collective intelligence process. So I just wanted to give a little bit more of a spectrum of who we are and where we're coming from here. And with that, I'm going to pass the talking feather to Marco, followed by Marcel. Go for it, Marco.
Yeah, first I would say it's glad to see new faces and people with like thinking. And I think what people miss in general is I always hear about carbon and carbon reduction, and people ignore methane or methane, however you want to pronounce it. And the fact that all the warming we're doing right now is releasing methane in massive amounts everywhere. And when we lose the sea ice, that's another source of methane that's going to be out there. And it's hundreds of times more dangerous or more heating in the short term. Doesn't last as long, but in the short term, it causes much more heating. But yeah, we're not about just marine cloud brightening. That's just a Band-Aid, just something to get us to the point where we are doing things like reforesting. Reforesting is one of the most important things we need to do. And turning agricultural land that's used for animal agriculture back into forest is going to be one of the best ways to do that, one of the first ways. But when you use the amounts of energy that the forest uses to provide vapor, and you're talking about a fully mature forest. It's going to take a while to get from seedlings to fully mature forests that are able to do that work. And on our current rate, I often question, has anyone gone back and look at all the people that say we're planting 1 million trees every year through our, buy this and we plant a tree? Okay, let's say everybody's planted every tree they ever said. Did anybody take care of those trees and make sure they survive in this, dangerous, drought-ridden planet right now? I'm willing to venture that most of those trees don't even survive. So definitely we need to do more about reforestation, but right now we need to save the patient. Immediately there's we can lose the patient here in the next few months to 2 years if we don't do some emergency care and save the Arctic ice and help it regenerate. And with that, I'm complete right now. Yeah, Marcel, please.
Sorry. What I want to add to the first to the brief video that showed that James showed the video. The problem is that it's not only the greenhouse gases that contributed to the warming effect, and that's what's missing in their models. So you're overestimating the role of greenhouse gases in the warming part, and you're missing the role of water in the warming effect. What happens when the Brazilian rainforest evapotranspire that amount of energy? It's all about transforming incoming sunlight into latent heat. So, and latent heat is hidden within a water molecule. And as long as it's in the water molecule, it doesn't contribute to the warming effect. Of course, water vapor is a greenhouse gas. But now you have to do the calculation. You've got the Brazilian rainforest. You've got a lot of incoming solar radiation. If there was no force whatsoever, then Earth's surface would absorb that energy and act, as always, like a black body. Yeah? So when the temperature of a black body goes up, then the amount of radiation goes up, to the power of 4. But when the incoming sunlight is being transformed into water vapor, then that amount of energy is not taken up, absorbed by the surface. So the temperature drops, and then the amount of infrared radiation drops enormously. So you will have more water vapor above the rainforest, but you've got much less infrared radiation going upwards. Yeah. So the effect of the greenhouse gas effect will be much lower. Then the other thing is you have to take into account why nature always connects oceans with each other. And that's also contributing to rise in temperature, at least in the Gulf of Mexico. Why is that? Because when a forest harvests those amount of carbon dioxide, it evapotranspires a lot of water vapor. Water vapor, air with water vapor in it, is lighter than air with less water vapor in it. If you have a high quality forest, then the surface of 1 square kilometer of surface is much bigger because of the leaf structure than 1 square kilometer of ocean. The ocean is most of the time cooler than the forest. So the forest produces much more water vapor than the ocean. When the water vapor goes back to water, you get a lower pressure area. And the pressure area is lower than above the ocean. So you get a low pressure area above the forest and a high pressure area above the ocean. So at that time, the rainforest sucks in the water vapor coming in from the ocean. That's called the biotic pump. Then the rainforest recycles that water 7 times and then it goes back to Amazon and some through the high rivers in the sky. But since we have been cutting down the rainforest and 90% of the Atlantic rainforest already been cut down, that means that the biotic pump is lowering. That means that you suck in less water vapor from the ocean. That means that the temperature of the water at the east side of the South American continent is going up. When the temperature goes up, that amount of energy is transformed to the Gulf of Mexico, taken with the Gulf Stream to Greenland. Greenland is melting, so there's a lot of fresh water going coming into the water. Then those Gulf Stream hits against the fresh water, it cannot sink, and then the AMOC is going to slow down. And that's also causing because then the heats cannot be transformed into the ocean. When you're forming clouds with, and I think James was saying, or somebody else was saying, that you only form the crystals with the vessels, yeah? If that's the case, you're forming clouds, but you don't reducing the infrared radiation. You still have the same amount of infrared radiation. Then you have to take into account, and I'm not sure, I didn't have done the calculation, but you still have the same amount of infrared radiation, but on top of that, you have got more clouds. So that those clouds, those water vapor, yeah, if there's more water vapor in it, otherwise you cannot have clouds, will reflect the sunlight and going back. So that will trap the heat. Of course, you will have reflecting sunlight from the top, yeah. But the rainforest do both. They lower the infrared radiation that's being emitted from Earth, and they strengthen the clouds, the sun reflecting, yeah. So there you have a much stronger cooling effect than on the ocean. It can be the case. I haven't done the math. So you have to take into account, and then when you go back and you're worried about that you cannot cool down quickly enough by reforestation, history shows differently. If you go back before the Industrial Revolution, you look 2000 years before the Industrial Revolution, you already have seen peaks in rising temperature and drops in temperature. That's related to the amount of forest that there is. At times when population growth was there was a lot of deforestation, because at that time you need much more land to grow the same amount of food that we do nowadays. So growing population is deforestation, also more deforestation for producing wood, for fires, etc., for houses. And then, for example, in the 14th century, we had a medieval warm period. There was already winery in Scotland, and there was already agriculture in Greenland. After that period, we got a little ice age. That name is not fully correct because it's a longer period. It's not an ice age, but it's a difference in temperature. Why did the temperature drop? In 1350, the plague hit Europe. And then 40 to 50% of the people over there died in Europe. You can read in the books of the landowners that they didn't have enough people to work on the land, and the trees came back. Then the temperature dropped in a very brief moment of time. In 30 to 50 years, temperature dropped quite enormously. 150 years later, Columbus discovered the Americas. Yeah, he brings viruses with him to South America, to Mid-America. 95% of the people over there died, and you can read not from the books of the landowners because there were no books, but from paleontological research that the forest came back. And you can see when the forest came back, the rain cycle started kicking in, becomes stronger. So history shows us that when we restore nature, you can drastically, in a very short time span, cool down Earth. Of course, then there's the next challenge. How do you line up policymakers for restoring nature? Well, if they don't see the cooling role, they won't do that. And if they don't see the cooling role of clouds, they will also not produce the vessels. So what we have to do from both of our stories, first, create the awareness of the cooling power of clouds. And if they see that, then do both, restore nature and also do the vessels, as long as it doesn't tampering with the rain cycles, etc. So I don't know, we have to look into it. But it's much more holistic than we're discussing. And it's certainly the video that was shown, because that was only focusing on the carbon dioxide. And it's just like IPCC is making the same assumptions. They think, okay, we have more carbon dioxide in the air, therefore the greenhouse gas effect goes up, therefore the warming kicks in, therefore you've got nature going down because they cannot handle it. If nature going down, nature becomes not a carbon sink, but a releasing of carbon sinks. Therefore, temperature goes up and it reinforces itself. That's the wrong thinking, because they just miss the water cycle. So it's a little bit more. So the one that's doing the NCEI or NOAA data set, they're also missing the water part. And also the methane, if you want to reduce the methane, because that's coming from a lot of the permaculture, not permaculture, permanent storage in northern part in Russia, etc. If you want to make sure that those methane will not come free from the land, then you have to restore the temperate forest and the boreal forest on the northern hemisphere, because they are producing the organic particles that are producing the right amount of clouds that are very sun reflective. Then when you have those kinds of clouds above the land of Russia, etc., they will keep the tundras cold, they will keep the methane in it. So that's also, you have to restore nature, at least from that part, because we don't have oceans near Russia and Europe. So that's the only way we can make sure that the land over there will cool down, by restoring the boreal forest and temperate forest on the northern hemisphere. So let's convince the world that clouds are cooling. Then hopefully we do both of the actions of the solar vessels and restoring nature. But it starts with making the policymakers aware of the cooling role of clouds, and then you have to have a big fight to fight, because that's you're fighting against IPCC, and that's the reason why we are working with reinsurance companies, because we need to have powerful friends and pension funds, long-term investors who have enough money and enough power to convince policymakers.
Awesome conversation here. Great stuff, Marcel. All right, we got 3 folks in the queue waiting to talk. James, followed by Bill, followed by Marco. Go for it, James.
Yeah, thank you, Marcel. It is an awesome conversation and well overdue. You see that this is what we need. Is we need everybody. You know what I mean? There's too many of us splintered groups out there who are, advocating for similar practices, and we all know, we're all very much aware that there's no one magic bullet, but there are, and there are ways and the technologies that are available to us to actually manage this if we can actually come together to organize and come to some form of consensus about it. But and realization of the urgency as well is most important to get the public aware of. Unfortunately, they're trapped in a cloud of misinformation on the mainstream. So, yeah, very vital that we have these conversations, and I'm delighted that you're here. And yes, Professor Salter has done the math on the reflectivity of the particles, and also with John Latham's work, and this is also all based on former works of Sean Toomey, Professor Sean Toomey as well from Cork. In 1971, he's done all the study on the albedo effects, but the particle size and it's not just the particle size that Professor Salter was talking about. This he's also taken into consideration the Aiken mode and the right ways of getting the particles, the right size particles, to get up higher in the atmosphere so that they do provide the brightness at the top level of the clouds. The smaller particles, therefore, they'll rise higher before they build, they accumulate enough water molecules on them before they start to drop again. But the difference is with the salt particle, he actually has the measurement down for how much buck for bang, or bang for your buck you get in regards to reflectivity. So I definitely get those PDFs onto you, and we need to be sitting down with the likes of Professor Salter and the rest of us. If you want, I'll send you a link, and I'll be arranging a meeting shortly anyway in regards to solar radiation management next week sometime. And I think you might be an interesting someone to partake in it as well, because as I said, there's Professor Salter himself, who's behind the work on marine cloud brightening. There's Professor Yeto, who's been invited. I'm still waiting on a reply, but he's behind the mirror reflection framework. And there are a couple in the guests as well invited who are actually not so much in favour of geoengineering, such as Jim Massa there now, whose video I shared with you earlier, and John Doyle from the EU Foresight Group will be there as well. But they're all now, they're not really up for geoengineering, but they weren't very much aware of marine cloud brightening and mirror reflection. And they have already admitted that there's validity, and the physics, the science is there, the physics, the math works out. So it is our only way to go to buy us the time. And Professor Wadhams and the rest are pushing now very strongly for it. So this is what we need. This is our time. This is our time now to come together, to work together for consensus, and to put all of these different plans in action, so that then we have a proper picture to put to our leaders, and not just to our leaders, but to inform the people first, therefore to get to push our leaders to do the right thing. It's our only way to go. It's the only way we can go. I mean, short of, there's no point talking rebellion, talking anything else in the sense of violence or non-violent protest or anything else. It's not working. We need to come up with a proper consensus and a proper plan that's backed up by peer-reviewed literature that they cannot argue with, and we just need to get that in their faces with the backing of the people. That is the only way to get this going. So the only way to start that is for all of us to start coming together and start engaging in these conversations now, and the sooner the better. So I appreciate your all being here anyway. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Before I pass the feather to the next folks in the queue, I just want to reiterate and reinforce what James is saying. Everyone is welcome here to these conversations. We have our formal 2-hour meeting on SRM every week, every Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific time, which I guess means it starts at around 5 p.m. CET, if I'm doing the math right. But anyway, I'll just stick to Pacific time because I know that's right, from 9 to 11 a.m. Pacific time every Friday. Please join us, as well as special meetings that James is in the process of organizing with support from the rest of us, notably Bill, who I'm sure will have an update at some point on Ye Tao and the Harvard group, since he's a part of that. Meanwhile, we've got two folks in the queue, Marco, followed by Michael. Take it away, Marco.
Yeah, Marcel, thank you for being here today, and you've explained the mechanics behind the forest and the ocean and the biotic pump very, very well. I appreciate that, and I appreciate another person that recognizes this is all hands on deck situation. Everybody and everything that makes sense needs to be done, and they need to be done together. Although where you're saying that the effect is can it be achieved faster with the forest. I'm glad you agree that we need to do both, because I don't think as fast, even as I can imagine from what you just said, as I'm trying to recalibrate how I think, it's just reforesting isn't enough right now. We need the quicker effect of the marine cloud brightening or any other solar radiation
Marco, I think you froze up. Yeah, Marco's frozen. Either that or he's really deep in thought. Or am I the one who's frozen up?
I know that's a big question, but I thought maybe we could have a letter writing campaign or something to our insurance companies to get them to protect the assets you're talking about, the reinsurers take these steps. Thank you.
Question. I have to think about that part. Why I'm addressing the reinsurance companies and long-term institutional investors, because what they're also known as universal investors. It means that their activities depend on the system. So if the system is broken down, then they lose a lot of money. So when you have investors like insurance companies and pension funds on board, and they see what the system risks are at this moment, and that you can lower system risk enormously by not only working on the carbon dioxide, but also on the cooling part from a minimizing regret point of view. Because the point is, we have to make a decision under uncertainty. Yeah, because it will be impossible to model after the digit the real cooling power, because things are so complicated. Yeah, so you need to do it on qualitative insights. Yeah, and you need to make a decision under uncertainty. Then minimizing regret point of view kicks in, and then you get the ones that know exactly how to minimize regrets are insurance companies and reinsurance companies. So when they see, wait a minute, we can lower our risk in the system enormously by also bringing back the cooling power, because we see the potential cooling role of clouds, yeah, then those system investors are going to knock on the doors of the policymakers and saying, wait a minute, we don't want to take that risk into account. And to make it possible that all those investments are being done, because you are talking here about how to save our commons on a global scale. And I've got a little bit of advantage of being Dutch, and I will tell you why. We Dutch people, we live on the sea level. Yeah. For more than 750 years already, we are building dikes and we are maintaining our water infrastructures. What we are doing, we have taken care of our commons, because if we don't take care of our commons, we have wet feet. but we have institutionalized it. If you have, from a system point of view, an archetype error, which is called the tragedy of the commons, that's described in the 60s and the 70s. For those that don't know what it is, if you have an acre of land, and let's say Jamie and I, we share that land, and that land can bear 100 cows. Yeah, we each have 50 cows. But I think, wait a minute, I can earn $1 more if I put 1 cow additionally on the land. Then my total income will rise. Yeah, but the total income of both of us will go down. But I will have an advantage. And Jamie thinks, wait a minute. If he's putting 1 more cow on it, I will put also 1 more cow on it. Then revenues go further down until the land cannot bear all those cows, and the land is gone, and we cannot have any cows anymore because nature is gone. So that's the tragedy of the commons. From an economic point of view, the tragedy of the commons can be solved in several ways. What we have done in the Netherlands, we have institutionalized it, and we pay what we call a separate tax, and that's a water tax. And that water tax is paid to the water boards, and they are maintaining our water infrastructure. We also have a separate election for that. So we not only have an election for parliament, an election for our community, but we also have an election for the people that are sitting on the water boards. So we have a governance structure in place, and we pay a tax for it, for maintaining our commons. So now, here you've got the cooling commons of the world. Everybody's benefiting of the cooling, but nobody's paying for it. Yeah. So if you take the cooling commons that's in the Amazonia area, Bolsonaro says to Europe, shut your mouth down, keep your mouth, because if I want to cut down the rainforest, I will cut the rainforest for economic purpose, because you're in Europe already cut down all your forests. So shut up. Yeah. So if we want to preserve the cooling capacity, we as an entire world have to pay for the cooling capacity of Earth through nature. And the same will account for the vessels, because who's going to pay the vessels? It has to come from the public means or whatever, because we have to pay that, because there's no business case made, because all the revenues is going to the society as a whole. Yeah. So when you're going back to the reinsurance companies, they are a system investor, like the pension funds. They benefit from lower system risk. So when you have those as your friends and allies, yeah, then you've got money backing up your talk. Then you're saying, on minimizing regret point of view, we need to add more cooling capacity. Then I want to have the reinsurance company on board to calculate the value of the cooling role. And they don't have to make a full model. If you only take the research and you make a probability distribution of the possible cooling of clouds based on vessels or on the forest, we already know how much assets are at risk in society, because we know exactly 1.5 degrees, so many trillions of dollars at risk, 2.0 degrees, so many trillions at risk. So when we have the probability distribution of the cooling role, and you multiply that with the distribution of the assets that are at risk, you get the price of the climate insurance policy that's within the cooling capacity. And the insurance policy can also calculate the risk premium that's being involved. And at this moment, if you restore nature or whatever, the cooling rule is not taken into account. So all those business cases are not rewarded for the cooling part. So when you want to make the business case viable, you have to give them an incentive for doing so, because then the business case becomes viable. Then you're going to restore the cooling capacity. That's the reason why we are focusing on teaming up with, especially we try to get Swiss Re on board, because they are one of the front runners. They are the second largest reinsurance company in the world. They're one of the front runners, at least on biodiversity. So from that role, they understand completely what biodiversity is. And when they can calculate together with the large asset managers, pension funds, real cooling role, then you get it on the topic of COP27, because and those people that are making decisions, well, they speak the language of minimizing regret, and somebody has to pay the bill, and they don't like paying bills. So if you show what the revenues are and how can you make sure that the cost of implementing the cooling is as cheap as possible for governments, they like that. And you also show that you can achieve your climate goals much faster and with less risk. That's our purpose of what we're doing. So your question about can you ask your reinsurance company to take action? You can always ask the question, what if we restore the cooling capacity? Yeah. But then a lot of people need to ask that question. That's also the reason why you need to have storytelling in place, so that people knock on the doors or call their representatives and say, why are we not restoring the cooling capacity? What do you know about the cooling role of clouds? But nobody is asking the question. But in our Dutch parliament, I know one person knows about the cooling role. That's the Party of the Animals, Party for the Animals, because I've got contacts with them, and they know exactly what the role is of eating too much animals, because you're destroying the Brazilian rainforest, because we have an industrialized meat production that uses a lot of soya, for which we are cutting down the rainforest. By eating that kind of meat, yeah, that will destroy the cooling power. If you produce meat animals in high biodiverse forestry, and you can do that in several ways, you need to have animals to produce high biodiverse green structures. Without animals, that's impossible. And if you eat that meat, because we don't bring back bears into the landscape, because we don't like bears crossing our path when we're walking into nature, so we need to eat animals. But if you eat those animals, then you have a cool piece of meat on your plate. And I'm talking also to Heineken, and I want to serve me a real cool beer. And so if they bring back the cooling power of nature, then this beer will be really cool. But great question, Michael.
All right. Really great conversation. Let's keep it flowing. We've got Bill is next in the queue, followed by James. Go for it.
Welcome, Marcel. I certainly agree that I don't think anybody would disagree with the need to bring back forests. And I liked your point regarding how the president of Brazil is looking at us saying, you know, grab your own nose. I liked how you were promoting means of potentially paying him to not cut down the forest to incentivize that. So I've been working with Mir for a while, Dr. Ye Tao and his group. I have been, we're looking at doing an experiment on an urban project, both using mirrors that I have actually personally, as far as taxing, paid for out of my own pocket, that were sourced through China, that are en route here now. They're approximately 50 centimeters squared, double laminate mirrors. And I found a way. I'm a building and electrical contractor by trade, got a couple kids. So obviously I'm doing this for myself, but I'm also selfish enough to be thinking about my kids as I've been pursuing this. I got involved in the whole climate issue about 4 years ago. And and I went 2.5 years not having anything other than doom and gloom. So I was it was really tough haul. And then over the past year and a half, I have been looking at Mir and Dr. Salter, and I was able to reach out to Mir. I'm a builder, so I was able to put some practical applications with that. And now we are basically trying to get Campbell Scientific to hopefully donate the $10,000 worth of testing gear we need for our 4-month-long experiment. I've also resourced through a local community college that has a film department, 2 students that are going to be working on the documentary for that. And so we're working with somebody within Mir that's done some documentary that has film experience also with that. And I don't know if you have looked at Mir yet, Marcel.
No.
Okay, so if you, in addition to,
Can you put it in the chat?
what?
Can you put it in the chat where I have to look?
Yes. So along the lines of sea cloud brightening, this deals with direct albedo with silica-based mirrors. If I could show, possibly screen share one of my prototypes, Jamin.
You're good to go.
So what I was able to do is the perfect degree. Well, here's Mir for starters. I'll share this. This is mirrors for Earth's energy reflecting, rebalancing, which is along the same lines of increasing the albedo effect. You use silica-based mirrors to get that done. And it's obviously going to take a lot of them, but regardless, that is, what am I doing here? How do I go to the next one? Sorry, I'm struggling a little bit here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay. So I found a way to fold over a mirror, so fold over a tire so I could get a perfect, I'm just going to show you the final product here. So I basically step on and push over a standard tire and put 2 carriage bolts through it with fender washers. It'll stay on its own, but this will just secure it. That puts that angle at approximately the most desirable 18 degrees facing due south. And what that mirror does is it prevents between 85 to 92% of the infrared from even occurring. So that bounces the sun's rays without even allowing it to turn into infrared, which happens upon it actually striking the Earth right back into space. So what we're looking at doing with these for our urban projects is using it as a form of air conditioning and earth cooling at the same time. So on the apartment complex that we're doing this on, the 2 end, it's a 6-plex. So the 2 end units have been remodeled with mini split air conditioners that run in the summer. The center one doesn't have it. So what we're going to be doing with this experiment is figuring out if these mirrors, and there's a lot of them, these are 2x2, it's 500 square foot. It's going to be about 135 of these mirrors on top of this center apartment. And we believe it's going to cool it better than the 2 end units that have air conditioners, which take energy to run passively. And I just want to show you that tire really quick because the tire is really important. So I talked to my friend that owns a tire shop and I said, so out of these tires that I repurpose, how much do they cost for you to recycle? He said $5. It's not really to recycle. That's how much it costs to transport them to a major facility. So what I do is I drill holes in the top of the tires. And there, do you see the two carriage bolts there going down through? So if you ever played with the tire, you can step on it and just roll it over in two spots, and then that gets the desired angle. And then, so this is just something that I can do on my own, and we own the building, so this is saving us money. So in order to put those mini splits on each end, if I hired I ended up doing it myself, but if I did do it, hiring a contractor, it's about $10,000. This is about 2,000 maybe. And then I asked my friend who owned the tire shop, I said, okay, well, how about this? What about if you pay Mir $4, keep $1 in your pocket, and then that will drive the cost of the mirrors down. So that the mirrors that you saw there, I sourced through my local glass vendor, cost me $50 for a lousy 2x2 mirror. We're currently getting the initial 150, which are double glass, double sandwiched, 3mm tempered, 2mm with an ultra fine piece of aluminum, with the largest natural resource that we have on the earth, which is sand, which obviously has to be melted, initially for $18. And then the lady said, well, it costs the same to send 150 as it does 500 as it does 150. So then I popped out another $4,900 out of my pocket and bought the remaining 350 mirrors. And the second batch for 350, we got them down to $14 a mirror. Now, and then if we're getting paid $4 from every single tire place that I can resource these tires from, that drops it down to $10. So basically this is passive cooling. And it also is preventing the infrared from even occurring. So yeah, so if you just Google on your computer, MEER, reflection, it's actually Mir framework now. And I'm trying to get Yi to show up at this upcoming meeting. I think he was thinking it was going to be something different than it is. So I'm trying to get them to focus, and maybe even, I've got a picture with Guy McPherson. I'm going to send a joint email to Guy and Yi, and along with another picture from Easter with my kids saying, but obviously, we're all very late to the game. I mean, I wish I found out about this 20 years ago, but I was too busy having babies at that point. But yeah, I just don't know why people are at home watching sitcoms, but they are. So that's what I'm doing in my capacity. And I guess I passed the feather.
Okay, let me interject before I pass the feather to James. We're almost 2 hours into this meeting, and we do have other stuff to cover. So I'd like to cap it at the top of the hour. So let's have 14 minutes more of sharing on SRM, and then I'll invite everyone to come back this Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific time in this same exact Zoom room, and then we can continue on our conversation about SRM, which is absolutely crucial. But we have other stuff that we need to work on starting in 14 minutes. So with that, I pass the feather to James. Let's be brief, everybody, and we'll have a lot more to discuss on Friday around SRM and other. Oh, Franka. Oh, shoot. Okay. All right. Well, come on back.
Yeah,
Franka.
we
We'll
set
be here
this
probably.
meeting at this time on Tuesday nights.
No,
Okay.
I know.
I'm not sure that I'll come
fine.
back, but yeah. All right then. Let's see.
All right. Well,
Friday.
you're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome here anytime, Franka. And thank you again for inviting Marcel and Peter and Stan and Bob and everyone to this meeting. Thank you so much. All right. Passing the feather to James. And then I think Marcel also has stuff to say.
Thanks, Jim, and bye, Franka. See you Friday. Yeah, just a quick one. I just wanted to say there in relation to, as Marcel was saying earlier, we have to get modelling done, so to actually find out before we go implementing all this. And Professor Salter has already done some modelling and they actually in particular, they were on about the amount of deforestation in the rainforests, and they were saying like that it's losing this moisture content then from the Atlantic Ocean. So they actually figured out through the modelling and all exactly where to position the ships up off of Alaska in order to create that extra moisture to come in while reforestation is taking place, to give the trees a much better chance of coming on and deflecting the blocking out the lack of photosynthesis that's happening now at the moment because of the heat. So it's essential for one and two, both they're all essential for each other, are all essential components is the main thing. And he actually has the designs right down to everything down to the nut and bolt now for the ships alone, but he also has his prototype designed for doing these tests. He needs to do about 4 months of testing on some island out in the Pacific where there's clean air coming in and clean air going out. He said he only needs to do about 4 months of testing for his final analysis on his spray, the size of the spray devices and everything else, but also just a little bit more of calculations to be done, he said. But he already has the prototype designed to fit into containers and all ready to be shipped out there. And he said it could be done and sorted and all for $10 million. Like, we're not talking astronomical money at all. In fact, the whole running out of the ships and the vessels that he was talking about, each vessel he even put down to the average cost of an old World War II small vessel, you know what I mean, in today's terms of money. So it's not beyond us in the least. It's just that we need the consensus to push for the most obvious and least evasive and controllable method of SRM in order to buy us time to do the reforestation programs and everything else. So I'll just leave it at that. I'm only repeating myself otherwise. I'd be delighted if you do show up on Friday and to Stanley. I mean, I actually remember it was Stanley himself that mentioned to us over almost a year ago now about the reinsurance crowds, like, and the Swiss bank. I remember him talking about that, and it was a very good idea. So I'm glad that you're doing a lot of discussion about that, because it is a good path to take. All right, like, prevention is better than cure, they say, but it's also better than paying out in the end for the damage they could have prevented. It's logical, like. So anyway, thanks again for being here. God bless.
Thank you, James. Marcel, I think you wanted to say something, and then Bill has his hand up.
Oh, no. It's Bill. Go ahead. So it's
Very good. Go ahead, Bill.
So I'm doing a remodel for a couple scientists, and I've been keeping them abreast of what's going on. And they're interested, and they're obviously thinking about us being frogs sitting in a pot. And I said, well, we got to do something. But one thing he pointed out, he says, I just saw this on the news, and that is that Tesla gets paid a significant portion of money from Ford and GM because their electric vehicle that's rolling off the showroom is a carbon. They get paid a carbon credit from the carbon tax from the big polluters that the big SUVs and such that are good money makers for GM and Ford directly to them. So one thing that I believe we should all tap into regarding SRM, which is an offset for the CO2, is to tap into the carbon. So for every ton of carbon that a company has to pay in Ireland, they have to pay 60 pounds. There's a big amount of money there that if we could get to go to either both mirror and marine cloud brightening, if we are the solution, then we should be getting those funds, and also reforesting. But at the moment, with the timeline, we are thinking that SRM, I mean, we're looking at possibly a blue ocean event this year. I mean, 2022. So, I mean, we're really unfortunately, kind of the dog jumping halfway up to the bone. It would just be nice if we could just wake up and get moving. I think it's about ready to blow open, but I don't know.
Thank you, Bill. Marcel, followed by Jamin. Go ahead, Marcel.
The advantage that nature has above the vessels is the following. Because if there is a disbeliever about the cooling role of nature, so that nature doesn't cool through clouds, we can do a free experiment without any cost. Because the advantage that nature has above the cloud vessels is that nature harvests carbon dioxide. So for all those carbon dioxide IPCC adaptive policymakers, they are focusing on the carbon budget of Paris 2050. So from the cooling perspective, you can create the climate insurance, because when you take the measures out, if you separate the measures into more renewables and less fossil fuels, it has an impact on the carbon dioxide. And you have forests that also are absorbing carbon dioxide. You can still fulfill your carbon obligations for Paris 2050 by both measures. The only thing is that we are saying we bring forward in time the investments in nature. Yeah, when you do so, you also start bringing the cooling capacity of nature into the climate equation. So you get that cooling capacity for free as long as you don't take it into account in your policymakers. What you can also do, what is a little bit difficult with the vessels from an economic point of view, so you have a disadvantage from an economic point of view. When I talk with the foreign affairs in the world, of the G20, and I say to them, I can give you a great bargain for your development money. You only have to separate the carbon credits in renewables and less use of fossil fuels and the green water carbon credits. Then I say, if a company wants to offset their carbon footprint, I give a ton of carbon dioxide costs $100. I said to that company, you don't have to pay $100, you only have to pay $90. Then the governments will give the $10 to the one that are receiving the carbon credit revenues. They pay it out of the development money pocket. And if the smaller farmers or other initiatives around green structures don't have enough with $100, they put some additional to make it $110. So they build a leverage system by separating the green water carbons and the gray carbon. So that's a benefit what we have. Unfortunately, the vessels don't have that leverage into it, because building the vessels, is not, the vessels in itself is not going to harvest any carbon. So you will not be rewarded for any carbon credits. So you need to have a new credit in place, and that's called a cooling credit. But fortunately, for us, nature has that cooling credit in itself, because it's one-to-one related to carbon. Because for every carbon molecule that we harvest, it evapotranspires 100 molecules of water vapor. So you can exactly know, if you harvest one carbon, it will produce this amount of water vapor. Those water vapor will produce clouds, it will cool. So through nature, you have economics, and you've got Paris and all the policymakers at your side. For bringing the vessels into play, they need first to be fully convinced about the cooling role of nature, or the cooling role of clouds. Then you need to pick a fight with IPCC, because they say we cannot model clouds. So you're fighting against the biggest brains in the world, between brackets, on climate. So that's a hard fight to face. So when we can establish the cooling role of nature, the cooling role of clouds, and we can have a calculation, then you can say, wait a minute, but if nature cools through clouds, yeah, and you're willing to pay this amount of cooling for restoring nature, then wait a minute, we also have a technology solution that's called brightening the clouds on the oceans, yeah, and that will help you in your economic point of view, yeah. So we most likely have a little bit easier story to tell because we also harvesting the carbon dioxide, and that's something that the vessels don't have. So, but the shared interest that we have is presenting the world the cooling role of clouds, and perhaps that can help you in getting the policymakers so far that they do the investment, because we have the research that we have shows the cooling role of clouds. Then if you say, wait a minute, we can also produce cooling clouds in this way, it costs you that much. Unfortunately, you don't have any revenues, because when nature is being restored, you also produce food, restore the water tables, increase the livelihood of people, and you lower the climate risk. So the first three are revenues for development money. So that will be an additional source. Unfortunately, the vessels are not producing food, not restoring the water cycle, and are not restoring local communities and local people on the ground. So you don't have those revenues. So you need to have to make a bigger case on the cooling, and that's harder than with nature. But if we work together, and we can prove the cooling role of nature, then that will also benefit the cloud vessels. I will put our website on the in the chat, and then there is some more information on that also on the climate part, and I'll also put a 5-minute video on the cooling role where we make a summary of.
Jamin, would you mind if I spoke briefly and then you could close? Would you mind?
Yeah. Please just make it very brief.
Real short. I took the liberty yesterday to send a letter to the CEO of General Motors, Mary Barra, asking them to build 1,000 ships for us, and also to Marine Power USA, closely affiliated with General Motors, to build the engines we may need. But what the hell? I sent them yesterday's mail. Thank you. I have an 80-year relationship with General Motors. My family has an 80-year relationship with General Motors. Thank you.
All right, and we have a 20-second relationship with the top of the hour. So and thank you for that, Michael. So I'll make the closing comments on this segment on solar radiation management, which is being recorded. And I would love to publish it, but only if everyone gives me a thumbs up, everyone who's spoken or shown their cat on the screen. Thumbs up if you want this to be published, thumbs down if you don't. I'm not attached either way. Okay, this will be published. And my closing comments are thanks to everybody. My closing comments are as follows. This is a very complex issue with very simple solutions. Plant trees, create more clouds, create more reflectivity generally, whether it's on the surface of apartment buildings, out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, or the cooling power of clouds, as Marcel has so well articulated. In order for all of this as a whole to be successful, we need more than just a dozen of us in the conversation, hence collective intelligence, and hence what we're doing in Los Angeles to transform Los Angeles into the world's first compassionate metropolis, which we're going to talk about next. And everyone is invited to stick around for the next segment. Everyone in this room and beyond are invited to stick around for this next segment on compassionate Los Angeles. And Marcel, looks like you've got something.
Yeah, James, thanks for allowing me to participate. And I've put the link to our website. It's called greenwatercools.org. You will find a video and the information. So if you want to know more Also, you can link on me. I put also a link on the video on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with me, then you will know where to find me. So thank you for letting me on in your group. And I think I will not make it on Friday because I already have an appointment on Friday afternoon my time. So
Sure. And you are absolutely welcome to stick around for this next segment because we look at the same problem from different angles and expand our scope a bit to feeding everyone and transitioning the world to an entirely plant-based diet. So everyone is welcome to stick around for the next segment. And with that, I will bring this segment to a close. And I thank you all for being here. Thank you all once again for being here. And thank you again, Franka and Stan, for all the amazing work you do that has facilitated this meeting coming to being. And so with that, I'm going to close this recording. We'll start a new recording for the next segment. So ending this recording now.